Businesses have no idea what's happening. Individuals have no idea what's happening. It's impossible to plan. And there's no briefing today from the government, Nigel Farage. So what are we meant to take from this? Do they know what the plan is and are they hiding it from us? Or is there simply no plan?
I think we know what the plan is. And by the way, this afternoon's announcement, of course, is that Peacocks and Jaeger have gone into liquidation.
Yeah, very
Another
sad.
jobs gone on our high streets. And yeah, sure, there was a move to online already. But you know something? If I wanted to go out now and buy a pair of training shoes for the kids, the local family-run shoe shop's closed. So guess where I go, Dan? Amazon.
Yeah.
And this is what we're seeing all through this crisis.
We're lining the pockets of Jeff Bezos.
The really, really big, rich global corporations are having a field day at the expense of ordinary men and women who take risks to set up businesses. And the other big divide, and it's not being talked about, but the other big divide in our society today is between the public sector and the private sector. You know, if you've got a job in Whitehall as a civil servant, you've spent the summer drinking beer in your garden, knowing that your job is still there at the end of all of this, knowing that you'll still get your 2/3 final salary pension, but for the 6 million out there doing their own thing, I tell you what, my daily email box that I get from people is actually quite distressing to read.
Yep,
such is
me
the
too.
amount of business that is being caused out there. But we know what the plan is. We come out of lockdown on the 2nd of December, and on the 3rd of December, we go back into regional tiered lockdowns, which they've already told us will be stricter and tougher than last time round. We then get a week off for Christmas, and we're back into full lockdown again in January. And that is the pattern, and they appear to be incapable of changing their view that lockdown is the answer. And meanwhile, the numbers of people who are not being diagnosed with cancer conditions, heart conditions, potential upcoming strokes, the number of type 1 diabetes patients who've not even been screened since March across the country. And I haven't even started on the genuine effects on people's sense of well-being. Look, we've got to find a system, Dan. Those that want to be protected because they're vulnerable, we must help to do so. You know, no more repeats of the disasters that occurred in our care homes. But we will find, you know, amongst the vulnerable, people who don't want to be protected.
Yep.
I'll bet there are plenty of 90-year-old spinsters out there who want to see their grandkids.
Yep.
And who probably haven't got more than a year to live anyway. So I just think at every level we're getting this wrong. But I think this government is showing itself to be incapable of change. And without wishing to depress your listeners and viewers, you know, we've seen private commercial companies telling us how wonderful their vaccine's going to be. Well, you know what? If I ran a private company for profit, I'd be doing my best, wouldn't I, to tell you I've got a wonderful thing. But when you think about it, you know, what about the 5 or 10% that don't respond well to the vaccine? What are the risks there? And there's going to have to be a huge amount of work done before we can start mass distributing this stuff.
Yeah, and even in a best case scenario, we're talking 6 months, Nigel, and we can't put up with 6 more months of this, and certainly the economy can't. And by the way, the mental health of the vast majority of the country can't either.
No. I mean, look, you know, the sheer practical problem of producing, even storing. I mean, this stuff needs to be stored at minus 70 degrees C. That's not an easy thing to do.
Yeah, that's the Pfizer vaccine, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the thought that we're going to have mass vaccinations of the population coming soon is for the birds. And unless we get a prime minister that changes his current way of thinking, or perhaps even a new prime minister, who's to say, we're going to go into an endless series of lockdowns, eases, lockdowns, and it's you know, the long-term cost of the country says to me, and I've said it before on your show, but I'll say it again, that right now the cure is worse than the disease.
So how do you respond, Nigel? Because if you switch on the BBC, ITV, Sky News, all you get... Well, let me tell you, because I switch on just to get myself angry and work out what we have to counter. And all you get is presenter and scientists, one after another, saying, you're highly irresponsible if you want to celebrate Christmas this year. I mean, Gabrielle Scully, who's going to be on after the news, says there's no point of having a happy Christmas if you have to bury your friends and relatives after. What's your reaction to people who are talking in that way to folk who simply want to go and have dinner with their family on Christmas Day?
Yeah, look, none of us that are sane on this side of the argument are denying that this virus is out there, are denying that it actually attacks. It isn't just respiratory, it's vascular as well. It attacks many organs, and it can be a horrible thing. Right? We're not pretending that is not the case, but equally, we know that flu kills large numbers of people every year. We know that every week 1,600 people die of various conditions in this country. But the argument we're making is that we can get together at Christmas, be responsible in how we do it. So it's not going to be the office party with everyone snogging, all right? That isn't going to happen.
Sadly.
We understand that. And I'm quite sure that everybody who is seeing elderly parents or aunts and uncles or relatives will maintain a sensible degree of social distancing, will use hand washing and actually things we should have been doing for years, to be absolutely honest with you. So this idea that just because we're going to celebrate Christmas, loads more people are going to die, I just don't buy that at all. And frankly, if you want to live in a world without risk, well, never leave your front door again. Never drive a motor car, never catch an aeroplane flight, never smoke another cigarette, never have another drink, never eat another hamburger. I mean, we have to get some sense of balance into this. And all life carries risk. And I think after an absolutely miserable 2020 for most of us, people should see their families at Christmas. And you know what? If the government tries to stop us seeing each other at Christmas, we will ignore them. There's something else I want to say about this, is that we've, as a country, been pretty compliant. Mm-hmm. Have you seen, Dan, what's been going on in Germany and Denmark over the course of the last few?
I have, yeah.
This is really interesting. Now, look, I'm not going to appear on a stage with David Icke or Piers Corbyn or any of these people. But do people have a right to protest? Do people have a right to voice their objections? And yet what we're seeing, if what I believe to be true from Copenhagen and from Berlin, are mass demonstrations against lockdown. And yet those same media organizations you talked about not a few minutes ago are not covering this story at all. I wonder why.
Nope, and it's very different to the coverage of the demonstrations over summer. Look, I want to speak to you, Nigel Farage, just before you go, about Sage as well, because I think Sage have to take a lot of the blame for the shocking advice that they've given the government throughout this pandemic. Really astonishing revelations emerging from a new TV show tonight, including the fact that Sage used Wikipedia to get their data very early on in the pandemic, which seems to be one of the reasons why they predicted the peak of this virus was coming in July rather than April. And also revelations that there were no experts on human coronaviruses within Sage. Surely the government has to get tough now and say, you guys on Sage have let us down. You've got to go and get some new scientists in who have a different approach in terms of how we can get out of this successfully.
Do you know what we have seen since this crisis hit us is that all levels, the British government and the way we run this country, are not fit for purpose. Whether it's the people that are on Sage, whether it's the performance of Public Health England, whether it's the abject failure of our cabinet ministers to admit fault at any point in all of this, whether it's the 12 billion that's been wasted on test and trace, which still only reaches 2/3 of the people it's supposed to, or whether it's the very uncomfortable chumocracy that surrounds the giving out of billions of pounds of contracts to friends and relatives of people in high office. I worded that carefully, in this country. And I'm not being party political here at all, but the case for reform of the way in which we're governed, particularly given as it coincides with Brexit, is, I believe, overwhelming.